Well, hello there, and welcome to my almost midlife crisis, the show that dives into that tricky time in our lives when we're no longer young, but we aren't old yet either. I'm your host, Jennifer Villamel. Whether you're the first one in your social circle to get pregnant, or in my case, the last, doing things on your own time sometimes can leave you feeling lonely. I'm so happy that we waited to start a family, but sometimes it feels like I missed the boat to experience it with my friends. Since I became pregnant, I felt the need to look outside my social circle to build connections with other women in the same life stage. And I found that this is actually more common than we think it is. So if you're new to pregnancy or to motherhood and are feeling a little lonely and wondering, how do I meet mommy friends? Then this episode is for you. Let's dive in. So, getting pregnant at 39 has its upsides. I feel so much more relaxed and ready than I was anticipating to be. I'm not sweating the small stuff or getting hung up on details that I know in the long run aren't really going to matter much. And I'm focusing on enjoying the experience and taking in just like the pure amazement of what our body can do. I mean, think about it. When I went to my 20-week anatomy scan, I saw an actual skeleton. I saw like organs and bones, and I was truly blown away that there was now a real human inside of me. Before that, the ultrasound, the images were really like this small blob. And then like the next ultrasound, it was a more defined blob. But now there's a skeleton, and my body produced human organs and bone structure from scratch. I mean, talk about scratch cooking. And every time I feel my little girl kick in my belly, I'm reminded that while my clothes may be getting tighter, I am growing a human child, and that's pretty remarkable. And listen, this is not new news to me. Like, I know there's not a stork. I understand how biology works, but you know, it is really different when you're actually experiencing it for yourself. Because growing up, I wasn't sure I even wanted kids, but I figured if I had them, I would be going through this with my friends. Like, we'd share stories, and our kids would be similar ages, and they would all be best friends just like us, right? Like, that's the dream. But now, fast forward to today, I'm almost 40 and I'm pregnant with my first and only child. And my three closest friends that were part of this fantasy have eight children between them. The oldest being 13, which, how did that even happen? And the youngest being five. The four of us have also always lived, at least since college, in like three separate states. So play dates aren't really like a thing. And don't get me wrong, they've been so great in terms of advice and being there, when I want to discuss something baby related. But in some ways, I feel like I missed the opportunity to connect with them in the way I had anticipated. Like, they're past the pregnancy stage, and they didn't have geriatric pregnancies, which makes a difference. Because as much as I'd love to sit here and say that all the fear mongering we have to deal with by waiting until after 35 to conceive is pointless, there is a difference between a pregnancy prior to 35 and after, and especially as you start turning the corner to 40 and beyond. And while every pregnancy is different overall, there are added differences when you factor in the age of the mother. So let me give you an example. So one of my friends was totally surprised that my doctor recommended that I induce labor on my due date if this little girl didn't come naturally prior to then. But for a geriatric pregnancy, this is normal. Like, I'll be 40 and there are added risks to labor and delivery. And if she makes it the full 40 weeks and doesn't come early, there are actually greater risks for my health the longer I let her rent out space in my uterus. And you know what? Maybe my doctor is being extra cautious, but to me, like, that's not a bad thing. It's so important that my baby is healthy, but my health is just as important. Like, the more women in their 40s that gave birth that I speak to, the more common I realize this process is. But it can seem unwarranted if you had a baby earlier in life. So while I do have some amazing support from these women in my life that have gone through pregnancy and motherhood before, They also don't live locally. I can't just go hang out with them one Saturday or meet up with them during the week to check out some maternity clothes. We have a constant group text chain, which is great, and we have monthly video chats, but I still find myself yearning for connection with women that are local and currently in the same stage as me, especially at the beginning of pregnancy. I felt so isolated and I was desperate for a connection. I will say I was at my lowest and loneliest during my first trimester. So 3 days after I found out I was pregnant, Christian went out of town for 2 weeks. Good timing. And my 6th and 7th week of pregnancy, were coincidentally my absolute worst in terms of pregnancy symptoms. I was exhausted. I was extremely nauseous, and I was unbearably constipated. And constipation is not something that I've really ever experienced in my life. So for those of you that have to deal with it on a regular basis, I now have a whole new feeling of respect for you. Like, how do you even function? Seriously. I was so constipated that I had stomach pains and I couldn't even get off the couch. And thankfully, this only lasted, until I worked with my doctor and found Colace. But those 2 weeks until I started taking the supplement were pure hell. But the physical symptoms were only a part of my hell. The mental struggle was the other part. It was like the dead of winter still in Chicago because it was February. I mean, the winter pretty much lasted until May here in Chicago, like middle May. Um, so I was cooped up and I was alone at home. And it was way too early to be telling everyone I was pregnant. So I couldn't just call someone and talk about how I was feeling. And I've never felt more isolated and alone. Like, I didn't want to meet anyone in person because I felt horrible and I didn't know how to explain how I felt without giving it away that I was pregnant. I also felt like I was going to fall asleep pretty much at any moment. So I didn't really have the energy for any sort of sustained social interaction at that time. I didn't even feel up for showering most of the days. I was barely making it through the workday. And then I was just like binging Netflix. I was bored out of my mind and I was lonely. And when people talk about getting pregnant, I feel like they leave that part out. Like, they leave out how isolating the first trimester can be, especially if you're older and pregnant, because you're even more hesitant to really share the news too soon. And maybe some people like having that little like secret between them and their partner, but that's not me. Like, I'm a social person. I feel the need to share with others. I mean, hell, I have a damn podcast. So I'm not really what you call a private person or an introvert. I get my energy from being around others. So being physically and mentally isolated took a real toll on me in the beginning. And I was dying to tell pretty much anyone I was pregnant and to be able to talk about it. So when we were finally ready to tell our friends and family, I was about 11 weeks along. And we had waited to go, to our first trimester or our first like prenatal doctor's appointment because I really wanted that like doctor's thumbs up. And we also waited until after the results came in from the first round of prenatal genetic testing, just to like make sure there was nothing that we had to worry about. And of course, everyone was so excited when we told them. I mean, Christian's parents and soon to be, first time grandparents were ecstatic. My parents couldn't be more excited to finally have a grandkid for me after all these years of asking me like when the hell it was going to happen. And my brother and our friends and all of them were just over the moon for us. And for the first time when we started telling people, it felt like we could finally start to get excited. But it didn't take long to notice a slight change in how we connected. So, outside of my long distance college friends that are mothers, my local social network is like the exact opposite. My closest friends don't have kids, and more than half of them actually don't want them. And I will say that, they have been great since I've become pregnant. I mean, they never act annoyed if I bring up baby stuff, and they are totally supportive of my journey. And the support is like in the little things. Like when we hung out at a friend's house and they always like make sure that I have something non-alcoholic to drink, and more than just like water. They're not like, well, I got some water. Like they're always like, oh, I got, this flavored this and this non-alcoholic beer, and like, hope you like it. Or like, even one time, my friend brought a piece of rainbow cake because she knew that I developed this sweet tooth. So it's like, these small acts that they mean a lot to me because they're really, in their way, like they're going out of their way to make sure that I feel included, right? And I don't feel left out. But on the flip side, it feels like there's less opportunity to connect in person because, let's face it, like, alcohol plays, or played, not currently, a big role in my life pre-pregnancy. Like, I would go to dinners with the girls and we would spend hours chatting over wine, or we'd grab margaritas on a warm summer day and just like people watch and chat about nothing. I mean, in Chicago, a lot of our social life revolves around alcohol. And since I've been pregnant, it feels like if I wanted to avoid being around people drinking, I would pretty much have to become a hermit. So while they try their best to include me, being the sober one at the party is never really as fun. I mean, I just get more tired and they start getting like their second and third wins. And the bigger I get, the harder it is for me to join in the inevitable dance party that usually breaks out after a certain number of cocktails, especially with me and my friends. Like, I love dancing. Um, the last thing I want to do is be the like Debbie Downer that's the first one to leave the party, because that's also like not me. And in fairness, I will say that I am happy to play designated driver for my husband for like this limited time. Because between the two of us, I am definitely the bigger drinker. I'm usually the one that wants to like keep the party going. And so in our almost 11-year relationship, he has taken the role of designated driver. And not that we usually drive, actually, because I mean, we live downtown Chicago. Like, if you drink and drive downtown Chicago, you're just stupid. I'm sorry. Like, there are so many ways to get around. Like, you can get a cab, you can get an Uber, you can get a Lyft, you could take public transit, you could walk, you could rent one of those like bikes, which is still probably not a good idea if you're intoxicated, but it's like safer than a car, maybe not. Maybe you shouldn't take that advice. But needless to say, there's a lot of ways of getting home. So like, if you're driving and then you drink and you decide to then drive home, like, that's on you because you had options. But he played the responsible party, making sure I was at least like getting home okay, right? And I see women like boast that they're, oh, like, my husband, like, he's being so great, he's supportive, and so he's not going to drink during my pregnancy. Like, that's great, but that's not happening here. And you know what? It shouldn't. Like, Christian is finishing up his master's, and so he has this like pretty packed social calendar right now because he's trying to take full advantage of these last couple months with his classmates, and I want him to. Like, just because I can't drink doesn't give me the right to ask others around me not to. Like, God knows I didn't hold back when I was around pregnant people. In fact, fun story. When my brother's ex-wife held a baby shower for my niece, there was zero alcohol. And so my mom, aunt, and we'd all driven to Minnesota for the shower. And when we arrived, we realized there was nothing to drink other than soda, water, or like this fruit punch. We weren't happy. Oh, and also the shower was like 6 hours. I'm not even exaggerating. It was the longest shower I've ever been to in my life. And my aunts and I immediately rectified the situation because we like went and grabbed the keys to the rental car, which was a bright lime green Mazda hatchback. It's beautiful. And we drove to the liquor store. And that freaking car, I mean, we rented a car because my mom, who lives in Florida, flew into Chicago so that we could all drive together because my aunt only had like a Mini Cooper and I didn't have a car. So she rented one so we could drive together to Minnesota. And she ordered like an economy 4-door or something like that, like a 4-door sedan. But when we got there, they were out of that level of car. And so they were going to give us this like small SUV. Well, my mom was not having it. Like, she did not want to pay for the added gas for this car. So she opted for a compact instead. So they give us this tiny, like, green machine that the three of us in our bags barely fit into to drive up to Minnesota. Oh, and by the way, we drove back in a snowstorm. So that was super fun. But anyway, so we sneaked the liquor into the baby shower and we spiked our punch. Not everyone else's. Like, we didn't spike the bowl because that's not cool. People don't want to drink. Like, you shouldn't spike anything that they don't know. But like, we would go into another room and like take our punch cups and like spike it. Um, but whatever, like, we had to, because you know what? We had to deal with the hours and hours of baby games and gift opening that day. And my now ex sister-in-law, and no, it had nothing to do with me drinking at the baby shower. But my now ex sister-in-law threw a fit and complained to my brother. But you know what? I stick by our decision. Like, if you're gonna ask people to sit around all day and talk about your baby, at least give them a mimosa or two. Okay. Like, that's just bad planning on her part. Like, know your audience. So I encourage Christian to take full advantage of my sober status, because you know what? Time is limited. And we're going to go back to our previous roles once the baby arrives. I mean, I'm sure, not as much, because obviously life changes a bit, um but my tolerance is going to be like the lowest it's been since freshman year of college, which I'm actually super excited about, because it's insane how much less we spend at restaurants right now without my drinks racking up the tab. Like, we'll go, and in Chicago, like, my brother always kind of jokes that he's like, I never go out with you guys where you spend less than like $100 a person. And it's true. Like, it's crazy how quickly it adds up, especially when you have a couple drinks. And like, I don't, drink the cheap stuff. So, you're drinking like a $15 bottle or glass of wine. You have like three of those. Like, well, that's, you're like racking up the bill pretty quick. So now we go to a restaurant and it'll be like, for two of us, like less than $100. And we're like, this is amazing. It's like the city's on sale all of a sudden. I mean, enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. But needless to say, while my Chicago friends have been super supportive and they are doing their best to make me feel included, it's just not the same sometimes. Like, I feel really conscious about how much I talk about my pregnancy or baby planning, because I don't want to bore them on something that they can't relate to. Like, I love my friends, but I still find myself yearning for connection with other pregnant people. But I had no idea where to start. Like, making friends when you're older is hard enough as it is, let alone when you aren't working and you're pregnant. Like, how am I going to find my sense of community during this time? So first, I turned to my passions. So one of them being Peloton. Like, I am an avid Peloton fanatic. If you listen to season 1, I probably mentioned it in at least like 4 episodes. Outside of my Pilates reformer class, which I do go to on a weekly basis, I exclusively use the app, the Peloton app, for all of my workouts, from like walks to the bike to bar class to yoga to stretching, strength training, like you name it, I'm doing it. My username is Pello Cult Member, because that's pretty much an accurate description of my love for this brand. And I'm actually really bummed that they are finally reopening the New York studios and I'm pregnant, because I have a friend that's super into Peloton too. And we had actually talked about doing a weekend trip once the studios reopen and taking like as many classes with our favorite instructors as we can. And I was so jealous when I did a ride the other day with Cody Rigsby and I saw that there were people in the class. Like, oh, it's like killed me. I was like, oh, I want to do that so bad. But I don't want to do that if I'm pregnant. Like, I want to do that when I can show up strong on the leaderboard and like take advantage of the competitive nature of an in-person class. So it's going to have to wait, probably to like spring or summer. But anyway, there's a huge group of Peloton moms and moms to be out there. So I joined a Facebook group called Peloton Pregos and Postpartum. So not only we can connect on the pregnancy, but also our love for Pelotons. It's kind of like a win-win. And I also joined a Facebook group called Pregnancy After 40, which has been honestly really helpful in terms of conversations and like tips specifically regarding geriatric pregnancies. But both of these groups are online only. Like, randomly, I did find out one of our friends that lives in the burbs is part of the Peloton group, which is just funny, but I haven't met anyone else from these groups in real life, right? So after further digging, I found the social app called Peanut. And this is an app entirely dedicated to pregnant women and moms. So there are groups you can join that are relevant to you, like October 2022 babies for all of us doing October. Or there's a Chicago group, so I can just connect with other moms locally. And there are live conversations you can join with experts or just like other members. And you can have one-to-one matching as well, almost like Tinder, but for moms. Like you get different profiles and you either swipe up, which is called like a wave on the platform, or if you want to connect with them. But if you don't, then you swipe down. And then you can have like a text conversation right there in the app, like one-on-one. And at first it's kind of weird because it feels like you're dating, but you're really just connecting with potential friends. So I'm sure you're wondering, so like, what's your qualifications to swipe up? Swipe up or down? I feel like that's always the question. I mean, that's what it would be like if you were on a dating app and you wonder why did someone swipe on me or not swipe on me? So okay, like I'll share my consideration set for my swipes with you. Hopefully, I don't piss anyone off, but I feel like they're reasonable. Okay, so first of all, I look at their location. If you're in the burbs, that's a no. That's a no for me. I'm sorry. Like I'm looking for people I can meet in person. And the reality is that once people move to the burbs, they might as well move to another state. Like every person that I've ever met that moved from the city to the burbs, all of a sudden, like if you see them a couple times a year, like that's a win. I mean, it's crazy. It's like you're just going to see them once in a while. It's pretty much going to be a digital relationship. And you know what? I don't need more of those. I have them. I have the Peloton group for that. I have my friends. Like, I don't need that. Like, if someone lives 45 minutes away and that's with no traffic, which, like, when does that happen? You aren't meeting them for like a walk in the park or just like a quick lunch. It's now turned into this like whole ordeal where you have to like plan your day around it. So the burbs are a no go for me. So that's a big swipe down. Also, I usually swipe down if someone is in their 20s. Sorry, you can call me an ageist. But again, like I'm looking to connect with people in the same life stage as me, pregnant or not. Like I don't have a ton in common with someone that's 25 years old. Like our lives are different and our pregnancies are different. So sorry, but I prefer to connect with moms to be that are at least in their 30s, like early 30s at least. And I also try to focus on first time moms. I have connected with some that have like another child already because maybe they live really close to me and they're like currently pregnant with another but they have one previously but they live super close, or maybe we have a lot of interests in common, um but I have a lot of experienced mothers in my life because I'm the last one to do it. So I really wanted to focus on first time moms to experience this together. And then hobbies are the last one. Like I try to focus on those that have a full-time job and who like to travel and are like into fitness, like things that are important to me. And I know what you're saying, like you're not working, so that's a little hypocritical that you're only looking into people that work full time. And you know what? The answer is simple. Like, I know I'm not going to be a stay at home mom. I'm just not. Like, I have so much respect for stay at home moms. Like, if you want to be a stay at home mom, good for you. I'm sure your child will appreciate it and you'll probably disappoint them a lot less than I will. But I am just too career minded for that. Like, I just can't. I know that I would not be fulfilled and it's not going to work out that way. And if I want to make friends with women that we can hopefully have our kids have like play dates later on, then I want to make sure that I'm friends with moms that are also going to be working moms. So we have even more to connect on, right? Because that's like a whole different struggle. So those are basically my filters, like location, age, first time moms, and hobbies and interests. And then after like the online conversations a couple weeks ago, I finally met some of these women in real life. So I met a group of 6 women from Peanuts for lunch, and I was so excited about it. Like all week I was looking forward to it. It's been a long time since I tried making new friends though, and it felt super intimidating. Like, as we get older, it's so much harder to make friends. Like maybe you meet people at work, maybe if you're getting your MBA, but it seems the older we get, the more set in our social circle we become. So I was feeling a bit rusty on the friends front, and I was a little nervous about showing up at a restaurant when I didn't know any of the people I was even meeting. But when I arrived, so I walk up to the host and I couldn't remember whose name the reservation was under. So I was like, hi, I'm here meeting a party for 7. And it's a party of like pregnant people. Now, honestly, I thought this was something that would be like easily identifiable. Like it was for lunch. How many parties of 7 do you have of pregnant people? Like, no doubt. Like you just have like a ton of those sitting around. Like I doubt it. But either she wasn't aware they were pregnant or she was just, I don't know, being nice. Because she looked at me with just this like blank stare. Like, so strike one. I was like, oh, cool. I'm now hoping that I'm not going to end up striking out after riding my bike to this neighborhood with such high hopes. So I did have to search in the app for the name. And so she found the table, which was literally actually like 4 tables behind the host. It was directly in like her line of sight, but whatever. um, so I went to the table. And even though I had never met these women, the second I sat down, I totally felt welcomed. Like everyone was so nice and friendly and just like curious, right? I was immediately bombarded with questions, and it just felt nice being able to freely talk about my pregnancy with women that were in the exact same boat. I did have to remind myself to ask them questions too, because I'm sure that they also were yearning to be able to just talk about their experience just as much as I did. And I have to admit, like sometimes I can be bad at that, especially in groups. Like I tend to take over conversations and I talk about myself a lot and then I forget to ask other questions. And I blame this on my upbringing. Like in my family, they cared about what you thought. Of course, they cared, but it wasn't like they were trying to probe you or ask you what you thought. Like if you had something to say, you just said it. And if you weren't saying anything, you must not have anything you wanted to share. So during one-on-one conversations, I'm like much better at like the back and forth conversation style, and I'll ask plenty of questions. But in a group, sometimes I revert to my old ways and I just assume people will jump in if they have something they want to add. And as I've gotten older, I have worked on this because I know how much of an issue that this can be, not only with friends, but also in the business setting. And it's up to me to change it. Like I should not expect other people to like adjust. I also have a friend that's the opposite of me when it comes to this. And like her excellence in this area is like this constant reminder to me how much work I still have to do. But everyone had a different story. I was one of the few actually from the Chicago area. Most were from out of state originally. And there was even one from Canada. So that was fun. Love my Canadians. 2 were going through IVF and were going on this journey solo, which was so inspiring to me. Like, I was just talking about how I felt so isolated when Christian was out of town, but at least I could call or text him, right? I can't even imagine going through this alone, especially adding IVF into the mix. I just found it so amazing that they just knew what they wanted and they were ready now. Like partner or not, they were doing it. It was very empowering message in my eyes. And everyone had an interesting story, and we had a great time just sharing pregnancy stories. But also like how were our families and loved ones like played a role in their reactions, like things like that. And I didn't have to be the sober one. Like we were all sober. I didn't have to worry about talking about the baby too much. And I got actually some like really good ideas while I was there. So out of the 7 women, I seem to have more of a connection with like 2 in particular, which is normal, right? Because you naturally connect with some better than others because like that's life, right? You aren't going to connect with everyone on the exact same level, like when you're in a party of 7 people or 7 women. Plus, I'm trying to build more of long-term mommy tribe. So if you're going to meet a lot of amazing women throughout the process, of course you are, but just like in other parts of your life, you aren't going to be having like the same relationship with every single one of them. So the longer the lunch went on, the more three of us seemed to kind of gravitate towards each other in conversation. So leaving lunch, I was feeling hopeful. I was feeling more hopeful and energized that I had in months. And the whole way home, I rode my bike just like with this smile on my face, because I started to just feel the loneliness starting to like slip away. Right. I hadn't even really done much else since then, but I did actually work up the courage to reach out to the two women, to meet them for one-on-one like dates. Is that what you call it? I don't even know. Like it sounds kind of silly to me that I met these strangers from a pregnancy social app, but at the same time, I was excited. So, I don't know, maybe had I just started to create my local mommy tribe? So, in season one, I talked about how different people in our lives serve different purposes. And there are different levels of relationships. And while the people in your circle all should bring you positivity to your life, they do it in different ways. So, when you're raising kids, they say it takes a village. But if you don't have a village, then what do you do? Well, first, I think you evaluate the village you do have. For me, my college friends know me best. And while our kids may be different ages, we'll be able to connect on a whole new level motherhood. We may not be connecting how I would like right now, because we're not going through it at the same time, but definitely when it comes to like the whole rest of our lives of motherhood. And my local social circle will enable us to actually just not lose our sense of selves when we become parents, because I know that we're going to change, but at the same time at 40 years old, I know who I am, and it's important to have people in my life that know and love us for who we are, just like as a man and woman and not just mother and father. And then there's these new relationships that are forming in hopes of having a local in person support group that understands this stage in life and is going on the journey with us. So, just like pre pregnancy, we get to choose our tribe. So, consider who's in your life and what role they'll play once the baby comes. And you know what? It's okay if this new stage has produced some new gaps. There are folks in the same boat. So, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. So, thank you so much for joining me today. Please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Join me on my social channels to get more content and inspiration. You can follow my my almost midlife crisis on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's more videos on this YouTube channel, with videos and episodes and shorts to keep you entertained all week. You can also subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you're always up to date on the latest episodes, and get the written transcripts delivered right to your inbox at myalmostmidlifecrisis.com. Until next time.